These 3 marketing moves will literally bring you hundreds of leads to your school and academy. Listen, if you're new here, my name is Jennifer Waters. I'm actually the founder of 7-Figure Dojo, and I got started in this whole thing like many of you. I actually started doing martial arts when I was a child. My dad started our first school back in the early 80s, and as I was growing up, the school just wasn't doing so great financially. Now, don't get me wrong, we had great students, people were earning their black belts, I was competing and winning in tournaments, so were our other students, but we just weren't bringing in revenue. Fast forward, I was graduating high school, we were looking at shutting down the school. My dad, my mom, and I said, no, we really are just passionate about martial arts. So I started traveling the country. I started figuring out how to be able to grow the school. Did mentorship, marketing, systems, and strategy, started implementing them in our own school. And we grew from a few $1,000s a month to making over $1 million a year in about 4.5 years. Now, fast forward again, 14 years later, we have still been making multiple 7 figures with our flagship school. And now we actually work with schools and academies all over the world. We've worked with probably about 275 plus schools and academies at the time of this recording. And 7-Figure Dojo is the name of the company in which we do that with. Now, I'm going to show you those 3 marketing moves that are so pivotal that changed the name of the game for me and my school, as well as countless other schools around the world. And I want to just go ahead and empower you right now that you can do this. With the right tools and with the right mindset, you can go from a struggling school owner to a thriving school owner with a team. You can go from barely making rent to having so much profit that you are able to invest into yourself and into the team that you desire in the future. So the very first thing in order for you to do this is you got to get serious about the business. I remember a time in which I had a conversation with my dad. And in this conversation, we really had to have a heart-to-heart because I was getting ready to graduate school. There was an opportunity ahead of me where my grandparents had offered to pay for my college education if I wanted to go that route. And he knew what was at stake. I knew what was at stake. Both of us had to think about what we were going to do with this. For years, the business had operated at a break even, or sometimes even going into the red because we couldn't afford the rent. The tuition payments weren't coming in the way that we expected. I don't know if you've ever experienced that before, but it can be a pretty terrifying experience when you're trying to fork out money from your own personal expenses and savings and you don't have room, you don't have margin. And so there was a point where we just had to get very serious that no longer was it just going to be a martial arts school or a club or a gym, but it was going to be a business. And I know that there's a lot of people in the martial arts industry, and I'm sure I'm going to get comments here that go, well, martial arts isn't supposed to be about making money. And I would agree, martial arts is not supposed to be about making money. Martial arts business is. So if you are a martial artist and you want to just teach other people out of the goodness of your heart and you just want to pass on the traditions of martial arts, or you want to train with someone else, that's great. And you can go do those things. But the moment that you actually want to start being awarded payment in exchange for your teaching or in exchange for providing the facility where learning can begin, when you make that switch, you have to fully make that switch. It can't be, I'm going to dip my toes in the water. I have to take a full dive head first into becoming a business. And we didn't do that for years and years and years. We had one foot in the water, one foot out. We were traveling around. I competed a lot as a kid. So the school would be closed on the weekends while we were traveling. We would go to seminars and do countless hours of training to get better at our craft when we already had years and years of training, but we needed to learn something else in martial arts so we could bring it back to the students that we didn't have. And at some point, it just got to be ridiculous, to be honest. It got to the point where it was like, well, why are we doing this? We could literally just shut this school down and do this in our backyard. There'd be no rent, no utilities, no need to have insurance. Sure, we'd have strangers driving up in our yard, but they would only be the ones we invited, so technically they're not our strangers. They're not strangers, they're friends, right? I remember us sitting there and having that conversation, and then I remember going, I want to move forward and make this a business. Now, my dad had a full-time construction job as well, and so actually going and doing that deep dive meant for him, he couldn't do it. He couldn't do it himself. He had to rely on me to do it because he still had to have a full-time job. And being that I was just graduating high school, I didn't have a full-time job, but I did have a determination. And so if you are at that point, you've got to determine for yourself, am I going all in? And if I'm not, what am I doing? If I'm not going all in, then why am I calling this a business instead of a charity? Once you do go all in. And if you want more students, you've got to make that decision. This is going to mean that you're also going to have to do a couple of other things with your decision. You see, the root word of decision is decidir, which means to cut off. To decide means to cut off. And so what are the things that you are going to cut off in order for your business to thrive? That might mean you need to go to less martial arts training seminars, and you need to spend that money that you were going to spend on those training seminars. You need to invest in your business learning. That might mean that you may have to take a step back from competing if you're an avid competitor. That might mean that you have to say no to spending more time with your family on the weekends. But you're supposed to be able to do all those things, Jen, and run a business. Who said that? I don't know who said that. I don't know what myth that you bought into that said that you can keep living the same life that you're living, but expecting different results. Guys, that's the definition of insanity. Doing the same thing, but expecting different results. If you want something different, you have to do something different. And what you're doing now isn't it if you're suffering in your business, if your business is not growing. By the way, if you are serious about taking a deep dive and you want to know more about growing your own martial arts school, I invite you to join the 7-Figure Secrets for School and Academy Owners Facebook group. This Facebook group is specifically for you. All you have to do is go to 7fdfacebook.com. It's going to take you to an invite page where you can reach out. You can go ahead and ask to join the group, and we'll let you into the group so you can get more behind the scenes, more training than what we're doing here on YouTube about how to grow your school or your academy. So the first thing is, once you've gotten serious about business, the next thing that you must do is you need to get serious about tracking what is happening in the business. Now, there's a couple of key areas that you're going to want to start tracking, my friend. The first one is how much money is coming in. I get on the phone sometimes with school owners that are considering investing into their business, and one of the questions that I ask, and the question that my team asks, is how many students do you have? How much revenue are you doing? Now, some people might be going, well, they're probably wanting to size us up so 7-Figure Dojo can know what exactly they need to say to get us enrolled. No, we genuinely want to know what stage of business are you in, because if we are going to be working together with you, we need to know the exact specifications of the school that we're working with so we can point you to the right advice, so we can get you the right results. But so many times when I'm on these calls or my team's on these calls, we encounter school owners that have no idea how many students that they actually have, and they have no idea how much money they make each month. So if you're not tracking those two things, start with those two. Number one, how many students do you have? Now, how do you calculate that? Do you need a software to be able to calculate that? Not really. If you're keeping track of attendance, another one I highly recommend, all you have to do is count how many people actually showed up at least one time within the last week. That would be what I would consider your active count. The number of people who showed up to at least one class during the week. And that's your active number of students. Now, you may have more students on paper, but some of them may be paying, some of them may not be paying, which we'll talk about here in just a moment. But you need to know how many students you have, and then you need to know how much money is actually coming in. What are you making each month? The third thing that you're going to want to know is, what are your expenses? Again, I talk to a lot of school owners that don't know how much money does it take each month for you to do what's called breaking even. This is the amount of money that you need to bring in just to be in the black, meaning you don't owe any money to anyone at the end of the month. You had enough money to cover all of your expenses. That doesn't mean that your salary is included in that. It just means that you didn't have to pay any bills out of your own personal pocket. The business paid for it all. And if you know that, now you have a baseline for how much more money that you need to make instead of just guessing at it. The next metric that you should know is how many leads you have coming in every month. Now, the best way to do this is to know an average. So you take the last 3 months, and if you've been tracking how many leads have been coming in each month, you will have an average of how many that is. Once you know how many leads are coming in on a regular basis, now we know that we need to push just a little bit more. We can correlate the leads to the amount of enrollments that we have. So if you had 40 leads come in and you got 5 enrollments, you know you have maybe a 9-to-1 kind of ratio that you're going off of, or an 8-to-1 ratio that you're going off of. So that means that if you want to multiply and you want to get 20 students in the door, then we've got to go 20 times 8. That means I need 160 leads in the door. If that was my actual number, was 40 leads to only 4 enrollments or something along those lines, or whatever you would, whatever that correlation of those numbers are for you. So you got to know those numbers. And then the final part is obviously know how many people you are enrolling each month. If you know how many people you're enrolling each month, now we have a good average so we can figure out what are the next steps we need to take that's ultimately going to move the needle in our business. All right, so what's the next thing that you need to do? The marketing move. So the first thing I said was get serious about business. The second thing was start tracking everything. You need to know all those details that I talked about. The third marketing move is you need to have at least $1,000 a month set aside for social media ads. Okay, if you're not doing that, or a minimum of 7% towards the growth of your business, the business is going to be starved. I want you to imagine that getting leads in is like having a little bit of food for your business to eat. Okay, so your business is hungry and it needs new leads in order for it to grow, in order for it to become a fully mature business. If you're not feeding it those new leads, it literally is going to be starving. It's going to be cannibalizing itself. Things are not going to be working right inside your business. So just like when you feed yourself or you feed your child, you need to go to the grocery store and you need to buy groceries to feed yourself or your child. Well, it's no different. You need to go buy leads to feed to your business. Now, I don't know about you, but I would find it really, really challenging to feed a family, at least in today's environment, without actually putting a budget aside and going, okay, I can go to the grocery store and I can buy this much each week so that I can feed my family. Now, it doesn't matter if it's a little bit or it's a lot. You have some kind of marker there to say, I can go and I can feed my family with this budget. But for whatever reason, we think that we can get away with maybe $100 a month of marketing and that's going to feed the business. You wouldn't even do that for yourself with food. You spend way more than that on yourself with food, but you're not willing to do that with your business. Your business is hungry. It's starving. You need to feed it. If you are at a point where $1,000 a month is is less than 7%, then up it. Go to 7% of your gross revenue and dump it back into advertising so you can generate more leads. Now, I want to give you a little side note here because sometimes it can seem like, well, how do I know I'm going to get a return on my investment when it comes to advertising? And I hear this a lot. So I want to explain how return on investment actually works with online paid advertising or any type of advertising that you do for your business. You see, we all want a return on investment, but the way that we think about it is probably not the correct way. I remember thinking this way, so maybe you'll identify with me. I used to think to myself, well, if I spend $1,000 on advertising, but I'm charging like $150 a month, then I've got to enroll 7 students in the next 30 days just to break even. This doesn't really make a whole lot of sense if I don't do that. And I used to think this way, and maybe you do as well. But the reality is what if each of the students that you enrolled stayed for a minimum of 4 months? So at $150 a pop, 4-month minimum means that each student is worth $600. So in order for you to actually get a return on your investment, you don't need 7 students, you just need 2. Because if I have 2 students that are worth $600 that enroll, that's $1,200 for the $1,000 that I spent. So anything beyond 2 students is not just me breaking even on advertising, it's me getting a return on my investment in a multiple, a 2, a 3, a 4x on what I actually put in. It's like putting $1 into a machine and getting $4 out, or putting 100 in and getting 400 out, or putting 1,000 in and getting 4,000 out. That's literally the power of running advertising. So these 3 marketing moves are what catapulted me and my own flagship school, and how these 3 moves have helped so many other martial arts schools as well. So I really hope that you've received a ton of value out of this video training and that you're liking our new format of how we're trying to deliver this value. But in any case, make sure until the next time I see you, you stay awesome, my friends. Have a great one.